So welcome everybody. Tonight's workshop is on salads and vegetables. We'll be posting it, like I said, on the website, so if you want to review it. We have some recipes packets coming. They're not identical to what I'm doing, so you can kind of get some fresh ideas here and then some recipes from the note packet as well. Usually in the beginning of the workshops I go over the basics of vegetable preparation, cutting and board placement and all that. But if you go to episode 1 of the Soup Doctor, the basics it's called, I go over how to cut vegetables, how to set up your workstation, go over how to sharpen a knife and all the knife skills that you need to know. And so that's really important because what I find is one of the major deterrents to people cooking fresh food is that it takes a lot of time, right? And so if you don't develop knife skills and efficiency in the kitchen so that it doesn't become overwhelming to produce a meal, then you're more likely to do it. And so if you go to episode 1, I'll talk about how you set up a workstation, how you increase efficiency, knife skills, and so forth. Okay? So that's a really, really good episode of the Soup Doctor on YouTube. You can go to our website, it's linked in through there. Okay? So I encourage everybody to look at that. So we won't go over that in detail tonight. I will be cutting some vegetables, but it's a good idea to kind of take a look at that and get an idea from that. Now what we'll be demonstrating tonight is 4, maybe 5, if we have time, different salads and vegetables. One is already prepared. I'll be describing it. I cooked it off this morning because we don't have room to roast off vegetables. But first thing I'll start with is braised kale. Now, kale is something that most people think is garnish for your salad bar, okay? And they don't usually enjoy eating it. And so it's usually because it's not prepared properly, right? It's bitter. And people are afraid of dark greens because of that purpose. They find them bitter. So I'm going to go over the techniques of how you cook it to still be healthy and lose its bitterness. And it'll actually taste quite sweet. Right? Now, sometimes when I braise kale, I put white beans in with it. Sometimes I do it with sausage, like a turkey sausage or chicken sausage. But since it's just purely vegetarian, I'm just going with vegetables. But you can add white bean, you could add sausage or something along those lines, and it will be a great idea. Joanne, Carol, could you, in the fridge, there's a half-empty can of chicken stock. Could you bring it out for me? That'd be great. All right, so I won't start the fire yet. I'm going to show you how to slice up an onion. So what we're going to do is, one way to mitigate the bitterness of dark leafy greens is to use onion. Onion, when sweated, will become sweet, and it'll balance the bitterness of the kale. Okay, so what we're gonna do is saute down some onions as the base of this dish, and then we're gonna add the kale, and we're gonna wilt it down, and then we're gonna add some chicken stock and then do what's called braising. Okay, braising is kind of like simmering on a low heat. Okay, and so we'll go over that. So the first thing we're gonna do is cut an onion in half lengthwise. Right, and you want to cut the ends off. Okay, and that exposes you. Just put it right there. Thanks, sweetie. Appreciate that. And so that exposes the end here. And what you want to do is grab the onion, and that gives you better access to peel the onion. Okay, and you'll notice my board and my sweep sink are right here. I'm just not even looking. It's going right in there. I usually have my sink right here and my cutting board, and then my stove is right here in my kitchen. And since I'm right-handed, that works out well. So I cut, I sweep, I cut, I sweep. And so you're cleaning up as you're cooking, all right? So that by the time you're ready to go sit down and eat, you really don't have much to do. There's not like a chore after you eat. When you're all relaxing and watch the evening news, you can just do a dish or two. And so you don't want to create a big mess, okay? Because you want to have good knife skills, you want to have efficiency, you want to have good technique, so that you're going to put effort in, and you're going to have a good result. So the other part of the equation people don't want to cook is they make the effort and it doesn't turn out good. And so they're like, why should I bother? All right, I just spent all this time, and I got something I don't enjoy. And so you get discouraged, okay? So we're going to talk about preparation and speed in episode 1 of the Soup Doctor. But technique is what's going to turn out a good product. Okay? So now, when you cut an onion, it'll have a corn. Okay, see that little guy right there? Versus there's no corn on the other side. So that corn is going to hold your onion in place while you cut it. Okay. Now I'm not going to dice this onion, but if I was, you use the corn to hold it together. But I'm going to slice it thin because it goes better in with this dish here. So I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise, and then cut real thin strips. But when you get to the corn, you want to discard that part there. Okay. So slicing onions this way is going to get a lot more sugar into this dish versus if you cut it in a smaller dice. Okay, so I'm going to cut it in half again, lengthwise, and then slice it this way. Now, say if you're making fajita or something like that, you can cut it the other direction. And so an onion, its veins run this way. Can you see them? Okay, so I'm cutting it across this way. I'm going to release more of its juice. So if you wanted to make it a fajita, you cut it with it. It'll hold its texture better to grilling or something along those lines. Okay, but since I want a lot of their starch to come out of the pan, convert into sugar, it's going to then be better to cut it crossways. Okay, so there's that onion. And so I think I want another onion in here. The more onion, the better. Onion and greens always really go good together. So let's cut up another one. Now, dark leafy greens like kale, like collards, like mustard, turnip, all those type of greens are really, really healthy for you. But most people are very intimidated by them because they are either very bitter or they're cooked in so much pork fat that they're not good for you anyway. Okay, and so you can put a little bit of fat in it, and we're going to use olive oil tonight. But again, if you use a little bit of sausage or you use a little bit of white bean, you can add some protein to it. But if you're on the repair bite, then you don't want to put white bean in it. But you can use sausage bite for sure.
The piece that holds the onion together again, what is that called?
The corn?
Yes. Now that is at the root end, or that is
Yeah,
at the...
that would be the root end, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's get this guy started. There we go. All right. Now you see I have this is called a braiser. This is the shape of pan that goes down and straight in versus a saute pan, which would be angled in. So if you're trying to saute vegetables, it's good to have an angle so you can flip them. But this is going to hold liquid and keep it from splashing up and out. Okay, so this is good for doing combination cooking. Say you might brown something in here like a piece of chicken or something, and then you wanted to put it in the oven and finish it. This is a real good pan for that. It's called a braiser. Okay. So now when you're sweating onions, which I go over in episode 1 as well, you want to start with a kind of a cold pan. In other words, it's not blazing hot when you put the onions in, because it's going to develop the heat a little slower. So we're going to start with some olive oil, and don't be shy. Okay, this is a very healthy fat, and it adds a tremendous amount of flavor. Okay, so if you're replacing unhealthy calories, this is an excellent calorie to add. So olive oil, tremendous flavor. And it's really, really healthy for you. And so if you get your fats from olives and olive oil and fish and so forth, you're going to have calories to satisfy you when you're done, and you're going to have the health benefits versus carbohydrates, refined carbs, and starches and things like that. Okay? So what you're going to do is put the onions in, and right away you want to put some salt in. Okay? What the salt's going to do is going to draw out the liquid of the onion. Okay? And what happens is the liquid within the onion is going to convert into sugar, okay, a natural type sugar. And that is going to give it a really nice deep taste. And that's one of the keys to making good soup is sweating your onions. So, so right away we're going to go with some salt. Okay, salt is real crucial to sweating, to making sure that you've got the chemical reactions that you need in there. And then we're going to put some pepper in there as well. Okay, now, the next thing we're going to add some garlic. Now, there's a trick to peeling garlic, and I'll show you. When it's whole, you just want to put it on the side. Kind of press it down, that'll release the cloves. Okay? Next thing we'll put 3 cloves in. Okay? And so you'll notice it's got a little tail and it's got a little root. You want to grab it by its tail, put it on its side. Give it a whack. Put it on its back foot, give it a whack. That should come right out for you. People hate peeling garlic because it takes forever, so just give it a couple whacks and it should be good to go. Just like that. Now you'll see there's a little root end. That's the only part that's not edible. So you're going to trim that little end off. There you go. And then I like to cut the onions or the garlic on the bias. In other words, sideways this way. So I'm going to give you real thin slice so you can see what you have here. That's going to release the most flavor. So the root, the veins of the garlic run this way. You're cutting it this way. You're releasing it. If you leave it in this size, somebody doesn't like garlic, they can just not put it on their fork. But also, it's going to hold up to the cooking process. If you too small, it could either burn or it'll give up its flavor too fast, and you'll lose the flavor. Okay, so this is the best way to do garlic stuff like that. Okay. That's there. Now, you always want to add the garlic after the onions to have a head start. You want a little juice in the pan where the garlic will burn. So you give it a few minutes of head start because you don't want the garlic to give up its flavor too soon. You want to kind of get some juice on the bottom, get the onions halfway done, and then you're going to add the garlic. Okay? So we're going to add it now because we got to kind of keep these things moving. But normally I would probably saute the onions for another couple of minutes yet before I added the garlic there.
Is there an instance where onions in presence of olive oil becomes bitter?
Not really.
Okay.
No, not unless, only time olive oil becomes bitter is if you whip it, like with a food processor. That's the only way I can imagine that.
Okay, in presence of onion, okay.
Yeah, no, onion always, maybe if you didn't put any salt in the pan and you burn the garlic,
Okay.
you could become bitter. But other than that,
All right.
yeah, olive oil will become bitter if you put it in a food processor, emulsify it, become bitter. If you're trying to make a sauce or something like that. And so I don't want to rush this because if we don't get the onions sweated properly, they won't mitigate the kale. Okay, so you can see they're starting to get a little golden, not too much. They're still kind of holding their body. So let's start to smell the garlic now. And it starts to perfume out a little bit. Now, next thing we're going to do is talk about the kale. Now, I was lazy. I bought the bag of kale. Okay, $3 for this bag. All right, if I went and bought the bunch of kale, that is a third of the price. Okay, so convenience costs. And since I was in a rush to do this workshop, and I did this for the sake of time. But one of my episodes, I make escarole soup on the Soup Doctor. I show you how to clean ingredients in the sink and so forth. And so you can save yourself a lot of, $4 I wasted. Okay. So,
Time is money. So
time is money. That's what they say. You're right. So, these things are nice, but if you have time, you want to do it from scratch, it's always cheaper and probably better.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to let them onions give another minute or so. Now, the next key to cooking greens is to sweat them down. Okay, so you have to wilt them to release the bitterness. Okay, so we got to get the iron into a different form here. Okay, so we're going to saute them. They're going to turn brighter. They're going to turn darker, shinier, and they're going to start to get wilted. See how they're all stiff here. All right. So sweating them in the onions is going to release a lot of their bitterness. Okay, and that's the high iron content that gives it the bitterness there. So almost around here.
Dr. Doug, can I ask you a question about the olive oil?
Yeah, sure.
I heard that I need to be careful how high my heat is with olive oil. That it becomes detrimental for me if I go too high?
Well, most kitchens, home kitchens, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. So I don't think you have to worry about it unless you have like a pretty industrialized stove. Yeah. So your normal routine stove at home shouldn't be a problem. So now we're going to start adding this in. Now, I bet I can get both of these in there. We'll see. Okay? It's going to start to wilt down. And so you won't be able to fit it all at once. You'll see it starts to break down. That's when you're going to have to develop the sweetness of it. Okay? And then after I break it all down, it kind of gets wilted. Then we're going to add chicken stock to it. Okay? Now, if you're strict vegetarian, you don't want to use chicken stock, you just won't use water, but you have to wilt it down. See how it's turning greener? Okay. And so then we'll start to down there. And you can use this method for any dark leafy green vegetable. Spinach you don't have to cook as long. The kale, you can beat the meat out of it. You can really kick it in the butt. You can cook it for hours. It won't lose its shape. It won't kind of break up. And so that's why I like kale. It'll take a long braise. Sometimes I'll do this part of it, and then I'll brown a piece of roast or something, and I'll roast it on top of the kale with chicken stock in the bottom for 2-3 hours, and that kale will still be holding its own. And so you can see it's starting to break down a little. Just going to keep adding it in there. But mustard greens I love. I love turnip greens. Add it in there. As it breaks down, we'll be able to fit the rest of it in there.
Does kale have more or less?
What's that?
Does kale have more or less nutritional value than it?
Than spinach?
Yeah.
I think it's probably more. Yeah. Kale and cabbage are probably the two most nutritionally dense vegetables. But, you know, it's not like spinach is devoid of it. Put some more in there. Put it there. So you have to wilt the kale, or it's going to be bitter. See how it got brighter, very shinier. All right, so now you've sweated the onions, you've sweated the kale. It's kind of broken down. For the sake of time, I'm not going to sweat the other can, but I could fit it in there. Then I'm going to put some chicken stock in. Just enough to coat the bottom. And then I'm going to put a loose lid on it and let it kind of steam in that. You don't want it tightly, you just want to let it kind of simmer away in there. Stir it every few minutes. And it could be done in as little as 5 minutes. You could let it cook, 20 minutes, an hour. It's still going to be okay. Okay? Kale, like I said, it'll take a beat. Right. And that's basically how you make braised kale. Now, at this point, if you wanted to put white beans in, if you weren't on the repair bite diet, that's where you would put the white bean in. If you had cooked sausage at this point, that's where we add it as well, okay? And then you just cook it with it, right? A lot of times in some cultures they'll use like a smoked turkey wing or something like that. Might go in there, give it more flavor, or you know, some protein and some meat source. You know, like a roasted chicken or something. You know, cooked meat that's already done would go in here real well. Okay, but you want to let it simmer away. What you want to do is let all that chicken stock dissipate, and what it does is picking up all the flavors off the bottom, and there were some brown bits on the bottom, what's called fond. So what's happening is you're deglazing, and so what happens is you get liquids release, they hit the bottom, and then there's a chemical reaction where they're converted from starch into simple sugars, and that gives a lot of flavor there. Okay, but then as they're cooking, they're continuing to lose water as well. Okay, so what you want to do is allow it all to give up their water, hit the bottom, and reduce. That liquid in the bottom reducing or disappearing altogether is what's going to give you a lot of flavor. So if you take this out, you've got a lot of water on the bottom. You want to take the lid off and let it just kind of dissipate. So it's moist, but not watery. Okay, that evaporation, that condensation, that is what gives food flavor. Okay, but I want to let everything meld for a while, so it's still kind of marrying. Some kale's given up its water still. The onions have given up, but their juices are on the bottom. They're marrying with the new juices from the kale, and they're kind of having fun in there. Okay, so we'll let it fire away for a while, and I'll take the lid off and let it kind of finish after we do some other dishes here. Now, the next thing I do is make a salad dressing. So what I do is I brought an empty grape poupon container, and so I usually make my vinaigrettes in something like this, and I keep it in the fridge. And it becomes my salad dressing dispenser. I'm sweating and follow my rules there. Now, basically, a vinaigrette is two things. It's oil and vinegar, or oil and acid, with salt and pepper. That's the basis of any decent vinaigrette. It's basically a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio, depending on your preference. Okay, 3 parts oil, 1 part acid. Okay, if you like it tangier. If you want to do it 4-to-1, if you want it less tangy. Now, the acids you can use are, lemons, limes. You can use any citrus if you want. You can use, this one I'm going to use tonight is a pomegranate white balsamic. Okay? Get fancy here. But I particularly like white balsamic vinegar. I don't have any, I had to use this one here, but regular balsamic, white balsamic. One of the healthiest vinegars you can have is unfiltered apple cider vinegar. Okay? And if you're not on the repair bite, you can mix it with walnut oil. Makes a really good vinaigrette. So apple cider vinegar and walnut oil, really tasty. Another good oil is grapeseed for making vinaigrettes. If you just want a neutral flavor, but you can use almond oil if you're not on repair bite. I use basically olive oil in most of, if not all, my vinaigrettes, unless I'm doing something, maybe Latin in theme, and so I'll use like an avocado oil. Okay, very healthy. Olive oil, avocado oil, both repair bite friendly. Really interesting flavor in the avocado oil. Yeah, but if not, good old olive oil is always a good idea. So now, after you get salt, pepper, vinegar, or acid and oil, the quality is the most important thing. You have a good vinegar, you got a good oil, it's going to taste good, right? Got to have salt and pepper in there, okay? You got to put the salt and pepper in the vinegar, dissolve it first before you put the oil in, okay? Then some additions to that. If you want to start getting fancy, the next two things you would add would be Dijon mustard and honey, okay? The Dijon gives it flavor. It's also an emulsifier. It kind of keeps it together, okay? Those are the next two standards there. So you see it's about 1/3 of the container. It's probably a little too much. Okay, so don't worry about amounts, just worry about ratios. Start with 3-to-1 and see how you like it. You can add or subtract. Right? What you do is you'll develop a taste for vinaigrettes once if you've been buying the wishbone and you're used to that, it'll be an adjustment period because it's so heavily laden with MSG and nasty stuff that at first you may not be used to the freshness of a vinaigrette, but over time you'll really develop a taste for it. Now you can see that a lot of the liquid's dissipated. Okay, that's why I keep the lid on. I don't want to dissipate it too quick. And in fact, I'm going to put a little more stock in because I want it to cook a little bit longer. And so another principle is reduction. So if you're making this dish, you run out of juice, but you don't like the kale, it's not tender enough yet, add more. Okay? When I'm cooking a soup, and I typically reduce my soups by almost 25% to a third from the full volume of that pot. So what I do is I cook it down by 25%, and then I say, okay, is it done? No, and then I have to put water back in, bring it up to volume, and let it come down again. Or I add more stock to get it more concentrated. What my staff doesn't know is that I reduce it down extra thick, because I know the little squirrels are going to get to it, and then I bring stock in and I fill it back up, recondense it, so that you guys have something left to eat by the time 3 o'clock comes around. So now some other things you can add to a dressing. Anchovy paste. Unbelievably good flavor. People go, oh my God, anchovy. Trust me, put some in your dressing. You'll have a really, really good flavor there. It's that hidden flavor in a lot of dressings that you're like, why does that taste like that? It tastes good, but you can't put your finger on it. And this paste is really convenient. You don't have to open the can. You don't have to get your hands on it. You don't have to touch it. All right? But anchovy, by the way, also so packed with omega-3s, and it's really, really healthy. So I'm going to put a little bit in here as well. Comes in a little paste. Okay? And I'm going to put some salt in there. Now, salt by itself is not bad. Too much salt is bad. So you want to use the proper amount. And my philosophy on that is, in terms of risk factors, it's more important what you're putting the salt on versus how much you're using in a lot of cases. If you're drinking enough water and you're eating healthy vegetables and healthy meats and so forth, and you need salt to make it taste good, then that's okay. Versus putting on a French fries or a Big Mac or something like that.
A Big Mac.
Yeah, no Big Macs. So what you put it on is just as important as how much you use. And so we're going to put some pepper in there. I'm going to put a little Dijon mustard. I think I got the recipe in the back of your packet there, so in terms of approximate amounts. And then, where's my honey? Put a little honey in there. Now, some vinegars you don't need honey, like balsamic is generally sweet. But we'll just put a little touch in there. Honey is also an emulsifier. And you just need a teeny bit. All right, now, what you want to do now is before you put the oil in, you want to shake everything up. So I got salt and pepper in here, I've got honey and Dijon mustard, a little bit of anchovy paste. Right? So you got to shake it up, dissolve all the salt, dissolve the anchovy paste, get all the mustard in there, get the honey dissolved before you put the oil in. Okay? Because a lot of stuff won't break up and flavor if you have the oil in there. Okay? So everything's mixed up, nice and convenient. And then we're going to get my Portuguese olive oil here. This stuff is really good. If I don't have enough, I'm going to have to. Now, olive oil, good olive oil will solidify in the fridge. So if you're keeping it in the fridge for dinner, you take it out 5 to 10 minutes before you're going to eat. So So I have to use some of this olive oil. I brought spare. There we go. All right, and so we're going 3-to-1 ratio there. Okay. And you don't need a lot of the vinaigrette on your salad. You don't want it drenched. You don't want to drip it. It should be lightly tossed. It should be just enough to give all the greens a little flavor. You don't want it a big puddle empty when you finish your salad. All right. So there is balsamic pomegranate vinaigrette. All right. Keep that in the fridge. A couple squirts on your salad. Boom. This will last you a couple of weeks. And you put 5-10 minutes into effort, and you don't need that wishbone anymore. Okay. So save your extra mustard bins and all those type of things there. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is toss some greens together at the end here with that vinaigrette. We'll do. All right. Now, you can see that there's not much liquid left on the bottom, but there's a lot of moisture. You can see And so that is pretty much ready to go. I'm just going to turn the heat off and keep it warm until we're ready to sample. So the next thing is we're going to make is a slaw. Okay? Now, cabbage is one of the most healthiest things. It's the most gut-friendly vegetable there is, literally. Especially if you make it fermented with sauerkraut and so forth. But just on its own basis, raw, it's excellent. All right, so it's also very inexpensive. So I brought some pre-shredded coleslaw mix.
Yeah.
And so don't want to go get my mayonnaise. No, we're going to make it a vinaigrette. We're going to make a citrus vinaigrette for the slaw. All right? And I use citrus vinaigrettes and cabbage slaws when I make fish tacos and things like that. They're really tasty when you eat them right away. And then if you leave them in the fridge, they'll start to kind of soften up. They have a different type of flavor. Okay? But shredded cabbage, $1 a bag. You know what I mean? Cabbage, green cabbage is 40 cents a pound. So it's one of the healthiest foods, and it's one of the most inexpensive foods there is. Okay. So these two bags were $2. So and it fits into the family budget for sure. Now we're going to put some other vegetables in. So we're going to put red pepper. Okay, if you're on repair weight, you can have red pepper. All right. So if you're going to chase the slaw, make sure you don't get any red pepper in there. But how you cut a bell pepper? You cut it in length, so you long ways, and it'll expose the ball there. You want to pull it out like that. Okay. You want to kind of dig out the veins, and then you want to tap out any seeds there. Okay. So you got pretty much 99% yield out of that pepper there. Okay. Everything else is edible, pretty much. Okay. And then, depending on what you want to do, how big you want it. Since it's a slaw, I want to kind of match the shape, basically the carrot you see there. I'm going to cut it in thirds there. And then when you cut a pepper, you want to have the skin side on the board so that it doesn't move when you cut it. Okay. So if I'm trying to cut it this way, it's flopping up and down. You want to put it like that, and that way, when your knife strikes it, it's not squirming underneath the knife. That make sense? Okay. And you want to keep your fingers up and under. Now, I demonstrate cutting peppers in the chili episode on the Soup Doctor. I'm getting heckled from behind by my staff over there. They're making faces at me. All right. So, you hold it with your fingers out of the way, skin against the board. Okay, and you can move quick and you can be safe. See how that pepper's not jumping away from me? Okay. Again, speed is of the essence when you want to be healthy. All right? It's a lot easier to go through a drive-thru, I know that, but the results are devastating for your health. So you want to be quick and you want to make it taste good. Okay? So now we're also going to put some scallion in here. Where's it? Now, I make this slaw a lot of times with protein in it, like grilled chicken, but you can do it just, pure vegetables. It's okay. Put some scallion in it. And so coleslaw is a great medium, all right? In other words, it'll take on a lot of flavors and it adds excellent texture. Really pleasant crunch to it, okay? So you can really jazz it up with some nice flavors. And it's really good for, like I said, fish tacos. Usually I'll pan-sear some flounder and I'll have a corn tortilla and I'll slap some of the citrus vinaigrette on there, and boom, I got a nice little taco there. All right, now the next thing I'm going to add to it, if I can find it, hoping you can see it. I didn't forget it. Here it is. Yes. All right, so we have some cilantro. I washed this already, I just put it back in the bag. Cilantro is Chinese parsley, it's called coriander, it's called. Right. It's got a really distinct flavor. It's really good for Mexican dishes. It's really, really distinct. But if you don't like it, you can just use a flat leaf Italian parsley instead. It'll give it similar taste, but I really like cilantro. Put that in there. Now, I'm going to make a vinaigrette from lime and lemon juice, and then we're going to toss it in that, and that'll be the citrus slaw. Okay? So, there's no law that you have to put mayonnaise and cabbage together. You're allowed to use other things. I know that some people don't know that, but... Alright, so you're going to eat kale and cabbage tonight and love it. Believe that? If I told you that before, would you have believed me? So, now, what we're going to do is mix the vinaigrette beforehand. Now, we're going to add some ginger paste. Okay, really neat thing, anchovy paste, ginger paste. It's excellent, excellent little product. It's basically just minced ginger. And so we're just going to squeeze a little in that. Boom, goes back in the fridge. Excellent for vinaigrettes. I'm going to put some pepper in there. And put a little salt in there. Now, I'm also going to put some garlic in here, but for salad dressings, what you want to do is pulverize it, okay? And so, what we're going to do, I'll show you how you do that. So you're going to peel your garlic, take nip the root off, and then you're going to put a little salt on it. All right, what that's going to do, get some friction. And what you're going to do is pulverize it. So you're gonna give it a smash, and then you kind of rock and forth, and you're just going to press the knife into the garlic and make a paste out of it. So if you're making a dressing and you want it all dissipated, so you don't actually have a big bite of garlic, you make this paste out of it. See what you get there. Okay. Now, in addition, we're going to add a little bit of mustard. A little bit of honey. And then some citrus. Okay. Let's put a couple of limes in there. And probably a lemon as well.
Now, a dab of honey was like a tablespoon?
The what?
The honey was like a tablespoon?
Yeah, no, it was probably more like a teaspoon. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't that much. Now, trick when you have seeded citrus, give it a little squeeze, and then squeeze it like this, and then give it a little shake. You can usually get a lot of the seeds out, especially with oranges. Same with tomatoes. You can do that as well. So we're going to put lemon and lime will be our acid for this. Now this citrus vinaigrette's in your recipe book, I believe. And so, if you want to make it Italian, you use flat leaf Italian parsley and just lemon. If you want to make it more Latin, Mexican, you use lime and cilantro. Okay? So you just basically make the same dish. You just change a couple ingredients. You're just, making a completely different profile there. And pay for that. These Reimers are great, by the way. And now, so we got the acid, we got the base flavors in, and now you got to emulsify them up a little. So before you put any oil in there, so we get my there. And so all those garlic, the ginger, the salt, pepper, the honey, and mustard are all dissolving. So now I'm going to drizzle in the avocado oil. Avocado oil actually has a high smoke point, which I didn't know. and you can use it for cooking. So, and then you just want to dribble that in. You always want to taste it. Pretty good. And you keep in mind that you're not eating this on its own. You're putting it over all of that food. Okay. So, to the taste, it's like, wow, it has to be powerful. If it's just bland as is now, once it gets diluted in there, it's not going to taste very good. So you want to make it strong and powerful and tasty, so that it'll complement all that vegetable over there. Okay. So, goes right on top. We got a pair of towels here. Okay. Now, while I'm tossing this, let's talk about what we have here. Now, this is what I call a broasted root vegetables. I'll come over here to the camera over here. These are braised and roasted root vegetables. There are sweet potato, turnip, and parsnip. Okay, there's a roasting veggie, roasting basics, I think, in your sheet there. I did a little different in this one, and so what I do is I use the basic directions of roasting vegetables, but then I add a little twist. So basically, when you're roasting, you're going to be using a very high temperature, all right? So I roast it like 450 degrees. Because what you want is certain chemical reactions take higher heat to get the proper caramelization. So you're taking the starches of the vegetables and trying to convert them into simple sugars, which gives them much more flavor. Okay? And so you follow the recipe for roasting vegetables. And root vegetables are different than regular vegetables. Root vegetables are starches. They cook a little differently. Okay? But what I do is I toss the root vegetables in olive oil, salt, and pepper. Okay? And normally I would lay them out on a roasting pan, and I would cook them at 450 until they were done. But what I discovered by halfway by accident is I had a lot of pan juices left from roasting a chicken, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And so I put it in the pan as well. And so what I do is I kind of steam the roasted vegetables in chicken stock with a lid on them for 10 minutes to start. Okay? And so I just put about enough chicken stock to maybe a quarter to a third of an inch, just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. And I put a tight lid on it, not super tight, just like some tin foil. And I let it kind of come to a start simmering for that 10 minutes. Then I take the foil off and let it finish. And so what happens is all the starch that's collecting in the bottom is becoming nice and syrupy kind of. And that chicken stock is concentrating and disappearing, but the chicken flavor is still there. And it's marrying with all the olive oil and the starch from the potatoes. And by the time it disappears, it creates almost like a syrup or a glaze. Right? So you want to keep that lid on long enough to allow some of the vegetables to cook and soften, so that when you take it off and it starts to roast and caramelize, that you don't have it raw inside and so forth. So I call it broasting. It's braising and roasting, kind of. So you add a little chicken stock and you let it finish. So that's what that is there. Now, that was cooked at 9 o'clock this morning, so it's not super warm and right out of the oven, but I bet you it still tastes pretty good. All right, so you can see that the slaw is done. Looks good, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we're going to be sampling everything here in a moment. But first, do you have any questions about anything we've gone over so far?
Doc,
Yeah.
you're going to use like a winter squash,
Mm-hmm.
and that could you just roast that separately? Instead of cutting it up, just place the squash on a pan. And,
What type of squash?
well, butternut or
Now, butternut would cook this. It usually cooks about the same as the sweet potato does. So it depends on how firm the root vegetable is. You want to cut them smaller if they're firmer, and bigger if they're not. So the squash would probably be biggest, then the sweet potato, and then like a turnip or a parsnip or something that is hard. And so you cut it smaller so it cooks at the same time. That makes sense?
yeah.
So, but the squash you would put in there, sure. It would probably just have to be a bigger chunk of dice
Right.
than the other veggies. So, all right. Good question. Okay, so there's the slaw. All right, and I'm going to toss some greens so we can have that vinaigrette. All right. So the point is, you can kind of see that it doesn't take that long to really prepare tasty food, if you know what you're doing. And you can follow some basic rules, and you're going to be in good shape. Now, so we'll toss that. Oh, yeah, I forgot. We'll spinach that to the mix. So, spinach. Now, this is all vegetables, but you know, you can always have your piece of chicken, your piece of fish with this, absolutely. So let's toss a little bit of that around. Now, sometimes I'm out of vinaigrette. You don't have to mix it all. You can actually, I'll show you what I can do sometimes, right at the table. I'll make a vinaigrette right at table side. Right. So let's see. I'll use it right. I worked in undergrad. I worked for an off-premise caterer, so we got to learn to use how to cook in stairwells and use what you had. So this is par for the course. All right. Can you smell that? Vinaigrette. It smells good. All right. So you don't need a lot, just enough to kind of give it a little coating. All right. All right. There we go. So that's the white balsamic pomegranate vinaigrette. Now I'll make a little lemon vinaigrette for some spinach. I have a couple salads to try. That. Put a little combination of greens on there. Get some water there. There's that. Look at that guy go. There we go. All right, so say you don't have any vinaigrette made up. Okay. Well, you got a lemon. You got your olive oil. This is how they do it. My brother-in-law's Italian. They do it this way, right at the table. And they don't mess around a lot, you know. Their salad is just 4 things. Get it on the table. And don't get fancy. The mustard, they look at me like I'm nuts. Pepper and boom. So fresh vinaigrette. 3 seconds. Boom, no excuse. Right? Give it a little stir, and that's ready to eat. Okay? Now, if I had a nice bowl, I could toss it better and make it look, more presentable, but, you understand how simple it is to make a fresh salad there. Okay? So, you toss this around a little bit more, and you could use a little bit. There. And then what I'm going to do is invite you up to start eating. Okay? I want everybody to try at least a little bit of everything. And we'll also bring the staff back and have them have dinner as well. Any questions about anything?
Does sweating the kale release more of the nutrients, or?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried to eat raw kale. I don't think you can make anybody eat it. So some nutrients are lost, but some nutrients are enhanced. And so, you know, there's always a trade-off there, for sure. So what we have here is the braised kale. It looks lovely. It's got nice and rich caramelization of the onions. Now, normally, if I had more time, I would have squeezed some more kale in there. So it's got probably more garlic and onion per kale than I normally would have, but I love onions, so it doesn't bother me. But there's enough for everybody to get a sample of that. There is the lemon vinaigrette, done real quick. And then we have the pomegranate vinaigrette, and then we have the citrus slaw, and then we have the roasted root vegetables. These are sweet potato, parsnip, and turnip. Okay? Maybe I gotta speak for these. These aren't super hot. They were cooked a while ago, so they'd be better right out of the oven, but they'll still taste pretty good. Okay? So we got plates, we've got forks, we got napkins. So please, why don't you just mosey on through the line? Everybody get themselves a little sample, and see what you like.